What is up, everybody, and welcome to another Armchair Fantasy Football live stream. As per usual, I am Corey. We've got Dylan in the house once again. We are doing another Dynasty Fantasy Football report. Before we get any further, 2 links in the description I highly suggest you check out. After, of course, you smash that like button and subscribe to us as well. Road to 1,000. We're getting there. I would love for you to check out our free Discord. Always talking Dynasty. If you have any trade propositions you want to bring up, begin a conversation there. If you just want to talk ball, if you want to talk about whatever the heck is going on in the coaching carousel in the NFL right now, different tabs. We've got general, we've got trade advice, we've got Corey's research, where I'll randomly nerd out and give you different stats that hopefully are of benefit to you. We also have announcements so that you know when these live streams are going on before I even schedule them on YouTube and before everybody else knows. So you'll get the notification on that as well. It's your best, most effective way to stay up to date with this channel. Second link is merch. So if you would like to support us in a different way, we've got some high quality stuff there. We've got sweatshirts in the mid-30s right now. We also have a great policy. It's through Teespring. So if you end up pulling that in and you don't like it, or, something goes wrong, manufacturer error, something rare like that, size is weird, you can return it in 30 days and exchange it, or just straight up return it and get your refund. So keep that in mind as well. Today we are grading, I'm excited about this one, all NFC North teams by position. And as always, we are answering your fantasy football questions along the way. We will answer those questions in between teams. So we're going to go Lions, we're going to go Packers, Vikings, and Bears. Conveniently enough, we did this the first time. We're going in order of the standings. I've talked enough. Dylan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be back, and I'm excited. This is probably the division I know most about, being a Packer fan, so we'll see what the grades entail.
Yeah, Dylan's a Packer fan. I'm around Packer fans. We're both here in Wisconsin. I am unfortunately, although maybe not unfortunately, pretty soon. We're talking about the future here too. There are some bright spots on my Chicago Bears team, but at the end of the day, they still want 7-10 this year. So a lot to cover there. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we will begin with the Lions, a team that even 3-4 years ago, less than that, honestly, the Jared Goff trade happens where it's essentially a direct swap with a couple different pieces. Goff one way, Stafford the other. Detroit is heartbroken. Goff is heartbroken because Stafford goes to the Rams and wins the Super Bowl in year 1. So now you've got 2 sad parties together. What do? They go out, get Dan Campbell, who believes in Goff, who said, "You're good enough for expletive Detroit, Jared Goff." Now they're in the NFC Championship. They took the reins of the NFC North right now. That's right, we are talking about the Detroit Lions. Pretty excited about this one, to be honest, because this is a team that we talk about failure, and they're probably one of those teams that come to mind, but they've improved a ton, and one of the places they've improved in that maybe people didn't expect is at the quarterback position. They took somebody that people were calling a bust at the number 1 overall pick in the 2016 NFL draft. He was carried by his defense to the Super Bowl a couple years into his career. Well, now his team is 1 step away from the Super Bowl at the time of this recording. Goff's story is phenomenal. The productivity is undeniable. If he makes it to the Super Bowl with this team, I'm ready to put him right up there with Stafford. And Stafford's had a phenomenal career. Goff had a lot of help early on, but this is a team that was really built from the ground up. He put up the second 30-touchdown season of his career, and he also cleared 4,500 yards. Dylan, you and I have identical grades. That's my argument for the A-. What do you got on Jared Goff?
Yeah, Goff had a strong showing the past couple seasons, I would say, specifically towards the tail end of last year, where he proved that he is the guy in Detroit. This year just solidifies it that much more. I mean, leading the Lions to not 1 but 2 playoff home wins, that's a big deal. And now in the NFC Championship, also the numbers are pretty comparable to his Super Bowl run with the Rams. And when he was with the Rams, he had Todd Gurley, who was another offensive piece. That was another reason that he got carried to the Super Bowl, but the numbers are pretty similar.
It's interesting, right? We keep hearing these stories of Goff got carried here, Goff got carried there. I think Goff and really this entire Detroit Lions team has earned their flowers. This year, even the first year that Goff was with this team where it looked really ugly early, and then all of a sudden, even last year, this team turns it around, takes out the Packers in week 18, and nearly makes the playoffs, but the Seahawks squeak in that final spot. They go on the tear this year, go 12-5, and Goff's at the forefront of it. But you kind of alluded to this, Dylan. Arguably the strongest aspect of this offense is the backfield. We saw Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift last year. This year it's the first-round pick out of Bama and Jahmyr Gibbs. And then you also have somebody in David Montgomery who has been phenomenal. Gibbs more of your between-the-20s guy, and then Montgomery's going to punch it in. He's your Jamal Williams of this year, if you will. I've got him at an A+. I was a little ticked off at the beginning of the year because I felt like we were kind of misled in terms of how much Jahmyr Gibbs was going to be utilized. I figured a first-round pick would get more carries from the get-go, and it'd be 50-50. And for the first couple of weeks, the fantasy community's freaking out going, not only is David Montgomery getting 75% of the touches at some points and, 60 to 70% of the snaps, he looks good. He looks really good. He's on a winning football team, and he's getting these reps. Not somebody we really invested in Dynasty. And then things leveled out, and we almost got a pair of 1,000-yard rushers. I might just declare this the best 1-2 punch in the league out of the backfield. It can't get much better than this. I've got him at A+. You've got him at an A. My mistake, I threw A- in here, but it should be an A.
Yeah, I have him at an A. I am very hesitant to give that A+ just because it's 1 year with the pairing of Gibbs and Montgomery, so we'll have to see how it matures. Montgomery's getting up there in age. That's probably my downside. The good side is that Montgomery and Gibbs, like you said, had a weird early season showing, but now it's clear that Gibbs is that every down back and Mont is that power back. We saw that transition halfway through the year where Mont was getting more of the goal line rushes and Gibbs was more of that receiving finesse back. The two backs also have a pair of 23 rushing touchdowns between the two, which is absolutely insane. That's just an absurd amount of points between the running backs.
That's interesting, right? I feel like we saw this with the Packers. I always use this example. When you have two different types of running backs that can complement one another, when you have your short yardage situation in Mont this year, and you have somebody who can get out on the open field and just tear you up. He kind of looks like an Alvin Kamara from early on in Jahmyr Gibbs. You've got a deadly combo, and then game script-wise, you work in the fact that this team has won a lot of football games. So, yeah, very, very bright future and, bright present for the backfield. It's no secret that the running back room is one of the many strengths of this Lions team. We'll go to the wide receivers where it gets a little rough by comparison. B+ and B from Dylan and I. It's still a great story, and Amon-Ra St. Brown being a late-round draft pick and, still being able to name off everybody that was picked in front of him at that very same position. He had a career year. Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond stayed healthy this year as well. They missed some extended time a couple of years ago, but this year, phenomenal. And they were the third and fourth options behind Laporta. We'll get into tight ends next. Very impressive numbers considering how the run game has performed really at the forefront of this team, that we're going to go and hit you in the teeth and run it right up the gut personnel and mentality that Dan Campbell has kind of brought forward. This is an all-around successful bunch. A bit of a drop-off from the one to the rest of them because Laporta's kind of wedged in there. But I still got him at B+. I mean, Amon-Ra has looked phenomenal. What do you got?
Yeah, I have him at a B. Amon-Ra was great. I think he got snubbed from the All-Pro.
I agree.
The reason I'm kind of hesitant is Josh Reynolds. He's becoming a free agent, and I don't know if Williams is going to step into that role that Reynolds holds. And if you get rid of Reynolds, Williams and Raymond had good supporting cast numbers, but Reynolds is kind of that third option, and you take away that third option, you're calling for another guy to step up, and I don't really see Williams or Raymond taking that jump just yet.
Especially when you have not only Amon-Ra St. Brown in front of them in targets, but Sam Laporta, who we both agree, it's a home run. I mean, we look at talent like Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce getting up there and all of a sudden coming down with injuries. Kelce was hurt more towards the beginning of the year and then just wasn't utilized as much throughout the middle of the year. Andrews missed an extended period of time, and we really got to know Isaiah Likely, which was a plus. But you start to wonder, alongside guys like TJ Hawkinson, who's going to step up? Who's going to be the future? Well, you don't have to go outside of the NFC North for that, right? Sam Laporta, over 900 yards, 10 touchdowns, had the little injury towards the end in the turf. I don't want to say little because those look pretty serious, but to an extent, it looks like he will be all right. He was back in playing in no time. I'm really excited about Laporta, and I think, he's a feature piece in this offense, and he's part of the reason we have the wide receivers at the grade that we do, because he's taken in so many targets.
Yeah, he takes over the game when he's in there. He complements Amon-Ra so well, being that middle guy in the field, in the open field game. And I literally wrote down Sam Laporta, enough said. I mean, the beginning of the year was slower, but boy, did he pick up that second half quick. He really just shot out of a cannon.
Yeah, we look at Iowa, tight end university right now, right? There's so many different talents that have come out of there. It kind of feels like Travis Kelce is the anomaly among those top tier ones. He was out of Cincy. Brother just retired. I have a hypothesis that Travis retires if they get 2 more wins in Kansas City this year. We'll have to see. But yeah, the next generation needs to show up, especially in a razor-thin tight end market. And when I'm talking about that, I'm saying there's usually a couple top-tier guys, and then you're streaming. I don't think we can name more than 6 or 7 tight ends in the NFL that you would trust on a week-by-week basis to produce and to help you win, and that you're not worried about dropping a horrible, 2, 3, 4-point performance. Very impressed with Sam Laporta. He could be a tight end 1 for years to come. And we finish with the weak link of this team. We'll see if it bites them. Again, at the time of this recording, NFC Championship has not happened yet. We'll see if it bites them this weekend against the dynamic 49ers. I've got a D as a grade, and Dylan's being a little nicer. He's got D+ for the defense. They allowed 23.2 points per game. That's 23rd in the league. They had to get into a lot of shootouts to win, and we talk about these exciting pieces like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like your Sam Laporta, like your 1-2 punch out of the backfield and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs both being around that 1,000-yard mark. Well, it's a good thing you have a lot of those pieces, because there have been instances where all of a sudden the Lions are giving up 27 and 30 points in a game. All of a sudden Justin Fields is having 2 of the better games he's had the entire year. Yeah, I'm going to bring that up. He struggled at certain points, but when he played this Lions secondary specifically, he had a lot of fun. This is a team in general, if you're just looking at them from outside of fantasy football and you're trying to evaluate them, you look at this defense and you get a little worried. You say, if somebody is hurt on offense or if someone's not on their game and you can't put up 30, you can't confidently say the Lions have this one in the bag, because they've let a lot of teams get really close to them just because of the fact they can't really stop the ball on the other end. So you've got a D+?
Yeah, I do have a D+. The Lions, very heavy offensive team. They have a few bright pieces on that defense. I'd like to think Aiden Hutchinson, holy man, is one of the bright pieces. You have stud veterans like Alex Anzalone as well. The secondary is a little rough, but I think they're going to draft secondary because that's kind of a weaker point on that defense. So looking on, they get a first-round pick on the defensive side, specifically cornerback or safety. I could see that really being a big piece on the defense next year. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here.
I agree. I think defensive back might be the move. One thing I forgot to mention here, 253 passing yards per game allowed. That's the 3rd highest. I will say, when you win 12 of your 17 games, teams are naturally going to go throw heavy because they're working from behind. But, I mean, there are not other teams that are 12-5 or up in this vicinity allowing 253 passing yards a game. That is a lot. Teams are really able to will their way back into games that may be able to, you might be able to say it's put away. You can wrap it up, put a bow on it. That's not the case against this Lions secondary right now. We'll have to see what they invest. But outside of the defense, Detroit, you're in great shape and for a very long time. The names that we mentioned, of all of them, Jared Goff is the eldersman, and he's still, I would say, wrapping up the first half of his career if he stays healthy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, super young. Jahmyr Gibbs, a rookie. David Montgomery, just off of his rookie contract. Sam Laporta, rookie. I mean, a bunch of studs on this team, a lot to look forward to in Detroit, not just as a football fan, but in Dynasty. You should be eating up those names, buying them for sure. There's a lot to be excited about there. Okay, comment section, Anime's in here. Good to see you. Andy is in here saying Amon-Ra is fire. Wide receiver would be an A. I have an issue with the depth. That's what I'll say. I don't know if you want to contribute to anything on that, Dylan. My big thing was depth. Amon-Ra, I am not questioning him at all. I'm not saying he shouldn't be a Pro Bowler. It's the availability of the guys around him, and then you said the free agency implications as well. Yeah, anything to add there, I guess?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say Josh Reynolds being a free agent, that's a huge loss if he does end up walking, as well as I don't see Williams or Raymond ahead of Reynolds. I think Reynolds took a huge role this year, and it's going to be a hard replacement. And especially with Williams having off-field troubles, and Raymond is just kind of a solid third option. I don't know if those two can really elevate to that wide receiver too.
That is fair. And then Andy coming in, Pray's in here saying, what's up? Good to see you, Pray. And then Andy saying, nice. I would just flip the wide receivers and Goff. So then you have wide receivers at A-, Goff. I mean, we're splitting hairs. That's pretty close. I think Dylan and I both giving Goff the nod here just because of A, what he's working with, and B, the fact that these are career numbers. You have a lot of role players alongside Amon-Ra who are doing their jobs, but there's also a general reliance on the run. That's why we have the grades that we have there. Again, Dylan should be an A and not an A-. I just screwed up there when I was throwing the show together. But I think when you look at a general usage standpoint, and then you really look beyond Amon-Ra St. Brown, there are other, one-man wrecking crews when you look at the wide receiving core. My Bears are one. Yeah, you really need to worry about depth. But hey, we respect it. I definitely think it's a talented group overall. Next is going to be the Packers. The Packers, what a year. It was supposed to be a rebuilding year, and the rebuilding aspect of that took all of about 2 months. They turn it around. They right the ship. They go 9-8. They debilitate the Dallas Cowboys. They make it to the divisional round. They, in my opinion, play the better game against the 49ers, and now we're here. The forefront of this team, and the reason they got as far as they did, the development on offense. And Dylan, all you need is love. It started with Jordan Love, who we have rave reviews for. Love is in the top 5 conversation in my book right now. I'm putting him as a fringe top 5 guy. I can't name more than 5 that I would take over him, given the tools that he was dealt. To have over 30 passing touchdowns, over 4,000 yards through the air, and take a team to the divisional round of the playoffs, again, with the weapons at his disposal, the youngest, by far youngest wide receiving core in the league. Very impressive. And oh yeah, just for the heck of it, we'll throw this stat out there. In the final 8 weeks, 18 touchdowns through the air, 1 interception. The guy went nuts, was hitting tight windows, was finding his wide open guys, was taking his checkdowns. I know there was the throw at the end of the playoffs, but if you look at the back half of Jordan Love's season and his season in general, it is undeniable that this guy has a crazy high ceiling. Take it away. This is your quarterback.
Yeah, this is my quarterback, and I've got him at a B+. I believe he's going to be the legit starter for Green Bay for years to come, but the Packers don't have him locked down as of right now, so they still need to lock him down. And we saw strong quarterback play from Love, especially down the stretch, like you mentioned. My only criticism is a couple dodgy decisions he has made, especially down the stretch. I'm not saying that I'm biased towards recency or anything like that, but that play was kind of interesting where he could have ran the ball for about 8 to 7 yards. Instead, he elected to throw it into double coverage. He didn't really see that. But the one thing I will say about Love is that his ability to adapt to film. Now, he's going to watch that play, and he'll probably never make that mistake again unless the clock strikes 3 seconds or under, and he needs to throw up a Hail Mary. I think that Love is going to be big problem in the NFC North for years to come, though.
Yeah, even in the NFL. And it's interesting and a great note when you talk about his adaptation because, and this is going to happen with any first-year quarterback when they do have growth and when they are improving, which more times than not, you're going to get better and not worse than stagnate. Guy's been marinating for 3 years, been watching one of the best to ever do it in Aaron Rodgers, and the first 8 games were not pretty. This team was operating under 500, and late in games, Jordan's throwing it into triple coverage. Jordan's kind of doing what we saw in the last couple plays against the 49ers. And yeah, if you're talking about the play, I think you are. Yeah, rolls out to the right, throws across his body into triple coverage. There are 2 timeouts, about 50 seconds left. We're able to sit here behind our microphones and say, maybe Jordan, you just throw it away. You've got 2 timeouts. Maybe you run for the first down. Maybe you run for a couple yards. Maybe you just can it and throw it at somebody's feet. Well, he's out of the pocket, so he didn't have to. A lot to say there. I will come in his defense here and say that was the biggest game of his career. So maybe just a little too much betting on oneself. He's made some unbelievable throws. We've seen the freeze frames of both feet off the air, of him throwing across his body. He's gotten away with a lot, but you can't get away with that much against teams in the playoffs. And I think he's, like you said, going to adapt, going to learn, and going to go, all right, maybe some things I got away with in week 14 or 15 against teams that are not going to make the playoffs are going to be covered and blanketed, and the top's going to be on the defense. I can't just hit him over the top and go with a vertical threat. That's not going to fly in the second round of the playoffs. But yeah, very, very, very high things to say about Jordan Love and the future of this Packers team. We'll keep going. One thing that we're not really going to talk about in a positive manner is the backfield. I mean, neutral, I guess you could say. See, I'm right down the middle. Dylan's got a little more hope for him. I'll start here. Injuries killed this team. I'm not really going to chalk it up to productivity. That's not my argument here. It did make for a fun ride down the road. I think the timing was great for Aaron Jones to have fresh legs the last month of the season. 5 straight games with at least 100 yards. Couple notes of bad news. Jones is 29 years old, and outside of this year, he has mostly been healthy. So that we're kind of looking at the twilight of someone's career in the backfield, with a couple exceptions. 2 examples that come to mind where it is the twilight of their career. I think Austin Eckler, significant step back this year, also saw some injuries. Derrick Henry, 4.2 yards a carry is still great in the NFL. For Derrick Henry, that's a step and a half below his standards, and we really saw some more of Tyjae Spears. We do have an anomaly. His name is Raheem Mostert. At the age of 31, he had a career year and stayed healthy. So I'm not saying it's not possible, and I will say this. It almost makes me want to push this up to a C+. You made the point before of extending a running back's career. The Packers kind of have done that, I think, with Jones, because they've had Dylan there to complement him. You take it away, you've got a B-, so a little more promise, a little more optimism than I.
Yeah, the optimism comes from the fact that Jones hasn't been the featured back
Fair.
for majority of his career in Green Bay. Dylan has been there to take the workload off of him, and I think that'll play in longevity for Jones. I'm not saying it was a perfect year at all. It was a rough year for Green Bay at the running back position. Like you mentioned, Jones hurt for majority of the year, but when he's healthy, man, can he run the ball well. And then A.J. Dillon, really disappointing this year, and the question mark is if he'll be back in Green Bay. I would like to say I hope so, but you had guys like Wilson step in and had a bigger role when Dillon wasn't really stepping up. So it's going to be interesting, and you never know. Green Bay might draft a running back as well if Dillon is out the door. So it's just kind of up in the air, and I'm at a B- just because of the Jones longevity situation.
I think something the Packers really have to ask themselves is, are we going to trust Emmanuel Wilson or Patrick Taylor's the other guy to make that leap if Dillon were to not come back? I guess there's 3 choices. Dillon comes back and we double down on him after not the most productive year. That's option 1. Option 2, we trust Emmanuel Wilson or Patrick Taylor to really make that leap. Option 3, you use a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round draft pick. I don't think you should go first here, especially with a running back. You go after that position again, and you invest some draft stock. They took Dillon in the 2nd round, and that he got the usage of a 2nd rounder. He was about as involved as a secondary back could be. I'm wondering, because not only is Aaron Jones 29, but he also has just 1 year left on his contract. I'm wondering if they start to look at this draft class and go, maybe we need a more definitive answer. Maybe we need some youth, and maybe we need somebody else to lean on, because in 2025, we might not have Jones or Dillon. And that's going to really leave some blanks on the page of, do we fill that with Emmanuel Wilson? Do we fill that with Taylor? Or do we start up a 3-headed backfield, get a competition going, and give the reps to the best guy? I'm not sure I know the answer to that. This is a fun story. And the grade really doesn't tell the story because of how this Packers team was built. I've got B-. Dillon has B. A lot of credit goes to Jordan Love because the wide receivers as a whole were a B and a B-. He did not have a Devontae Adams. He didn't even have a freaking Allen Lazard with a couple years under his belt. He had a bunch of 22 and 23-year-olds. He had Dontavian Wicks. He had Jaden Reed. He had Romeo Doubs. He had all of these guys in there with Christian Watson not in there because of the availability issues, and he balled out. My gripe with Green Bay is not the collective productivity, it's the lack of a primary weapon. If we're talking Dynasty, which I always try and circle back to here to benefit you guys, we don't have somebody on this team, in my opinion, who you can go, I want him over everybody else, in the next 5 years. Personally, I'm torn between Dobbs and you could say Wicks, but I'm torn between Dobbs and Reed. So you've got him at a B. Feel free to explain.
Yeah, I got him at a B just because of the depth of the position.
Fair.
And you have Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, Milton, Heath.
That's right.
There's no clear one option. The youth is a huge plus side for them as well. The injuries for Watson are a concern, but if you look at the spread of these receivers, the downside is that Wicks stepped up big early season, and then Watson came back and he kind of took that role. Late season, it was Reed, and then the playoffs, it was Dobbs. So there's really no one option. It's kind of like you roll a dice and you pick a number, and if that number is right, that's the guy that's going to be hot for that game.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, because even against the Cowboys, people were saying that Christian Watson had a seismic impact when he didn't really get the ball because he was the decoy, because Mike McCarthy, I'm pretty sure, remember the last time these two teams clashed, and that was Christian Watson's coming out party, right? That was his breakout game. Yeah, it's interesting because you do have a lot of depth on this team. You have a lot of guys who you're confident in saying, at any given moment, he could go off, but there's also 4 other options. From a football standpoint, it looks crazy good for the Packers because good luck defensive coordinators and good luck cornerback number ones who want to play man-to-man and shadow. You can't really shadow one person because the other 4 have an opportunity to go off. And it gets even more interesting when you look at the tight end room, which I would say a couple weeks in, maybe it's a C, C-. But the fact that we learned a little more than we probably anticipated about Tucker Kraft, that's interesting to me. Luke Musgrave starts the season out strong. We know they go out and they lose Robert Tonyan to the Bears, and the Bears didn't really use him that much. We'll go over that in a bit. But for the most part, we know Luke Musgrave's going to be the guy, and then he goes down mid-season, latter half of the season, and we start to learn about the other rookie. 2 rookie tight ends. I thought we were going to see them blocking because I thought on paper, if you're going to lean into any aspect of this offense with a first-year starter and a lot of first- and second-year receivers, you're going to lean on your veteran and Aaron Jones. In a different reality, does that happen if he's healthy? Maybe. But something else happened. He goes down, they lean on the pass, and all of a sudden we get to know Luke Musgrave, and then he goes down in a blessing in disguise. We learn a lot about Tucker Kraft. This is one of the better 1-2 punches. I'll make the same argument I made about the wide receivers, and you might have a similar point. We don't have a clear number 1. I think it's Luke Musgrave by a little bit, but we don't have someone who's going to go out there and get 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. We've got 2 guys who are going to hover around 400 to 500.
Yeah, you're completely right there. 2 very strong options at the position. Youth and years to grow is my huge reason to bet on these guys, if you would. And then you have guys like Sims and Degura who are the blocking tight ends, so they're kind of adding depth to that tight end position. I would say it's Kraft just because Kraft had a more consistent season. He didn't get hurt. He was out there. He was dependable for Love to throw to. I would kind of lean towards Kraft being the number 1 option.
That's fair. You did have someone who, even though we didn't see the numbers from him at the beginning, it's because he was slated in as the tight end too, but at least he was available for, I believe, all 17. I think he was out there for all 17. There were some certain games where he's banged up. Game time decision, questionable throughout the midweek injury reports. But Kraft was definitely out there in the field more. And probably your least favorite topic until today, and maybe these grades change because these grades were set before it happened. We'll talk about the no longer Joe Barry-led defense. I have C+, you've got D+. I'll keep it frank so you can rant because this is the day to rip the Band-Aid off. He is no longer employed by the Packers. Defense gets more flack than they should have, in my opinion, because, I'll especially double down on this now, the Joe Barry complaints are valid, but if you looked at this team on paper, offense and defense at the beginning of the year, and said, who is going to be the reason the Packers shock some people if they can scrape across 9 wins? I would have said Jair Alexander, Rashad Gary, Devondre Campbell. I would have said even Eric Stokes, who kind of had a tough year. I would have said those guys were the reason that this team has success. I would not have said Jonathan Owens. He was a nice surprise. You have a very strong defense personnel-wise. Coordinator, kind of, sort of, had some rough spots. One that comes to mind, 30 points given up to the Panthers. Now he's gone. G. Dillon, I wonder why you had a D+ here.
Corey, let me cook real
Yeah,
quick.
you do take it
So
away. Full screen's
on
yours.
paper, this defense should be incredible. Most of the defense is the veterans of the team. You went out and got Devondre Campbell. You're bringing in youth to the defensive line to help Kenny Clark. You brought in so many first-round draft picks to this defense, and you're spending your youth on the defense. Joe Barry completely shredded this defense on his own. You look at the game against the Panthers, and I've said this with you before, you can compare it to the game with the Bears. You look at the two defenses, you take those defenses, and they are night and day. You take the offensive lines of each team, and they are quite literally carbon copy the same of Panthers and Bears. Not good. And the defense looks different. Why? I don't know. Why is Joe Barry playing zone coverage when you have the best, yes, I said it, the best one-on-one matchup cornerback in the league? It just blows my mind. Why did it take so long to get rid of Joe Barry? Whatever, I'm over it. Bring in Jim Leonard.
Yeah, Jim Leonard's a name that's been popping up. Some people are saying Vrabel. I think he gets nabbed at the head coaching position somewhere. There's still a few vacancies. Yeah, I work inside ESPN Wisconsin, for those of you who don't know. And the number one thing I've heard about this not firing, he just wasn't extended because the contract was apparently on the cusp of being up. He was dismissed. We'll use that verb. The number one reason people tried to pull out of left field, and I don't know if you believe in this, completely out of the realm of this channel, the Bucs took initiative. The Bucs didn't like what they saw. They got rid of Adrian Griffin. I think it put a pin in the Packers' rear end, and they went out and made their own move. I don't know how you feel about that. Two very crazy things transpired within 24 hours. That's about as much as I'll say, but feel free to give your take on that.
I will add on that it wouldn't shock me because LaFleur historically is super reliable to the coaching staff. He doesn't make judgment calls like right out of the gate. So it doesn't shock me that this kind of was a front office decision rather than he didn't do good, so let's just get rid of him. I think the front office pushed LaFleur to make this decision.
And it was a productive day. It kind of a more low-key move, but the Packers also went out and got a free agent kicker who was on the training camp squad for the Vikings. And if someone's not complaining or blaming the end of the Packers playoff run, which I think could have gone pretty deep if they got past the 49ers, it already would have been a step away from the Super Bowl. The other complaint is Mr. Anders Carlson, who, if you want to go and look up his stats at Auburn, some people would say the writing is on the wall. The power has been there. The accuracy has not been. They also go out and get a free agent at the kicker spot, who is no longer a free agent. We don't have kicker grades, but that one would probably be in the same range as the defense, if not worse, considering the recent circumstances. But Packers, young team, great. Oh, what's up?
That would be an F for me. Kicker would be an F.
Okay.
God awful.
I'll give it a G. That's pretty horrible. Yeah, we'll go beyond the scale. But yeah, the Packers are a really young team, especially on offense. The veterans are kind of on the defensive end, and you'd expect the roles to be flipped, but they're making some coaching decisions. They're making some changes. And if you were to tell a lot of Packers fans your team's going to go 9-8 and you're going to make it to the divisional round with the frustration of Joe Barry, but a lot of potential on offense, I don't think you'd get a lot of complaints. So plenty to look forward to there. All right, this next one, I don't know if a team outside of the Chargers, off the top of my head, suffered more significant injuries in a shorter period of time than the Vikings. The Vikings go 7-10. The Vikings lose their quarterback halfway through the season. The Vikings lose their wide receiver one for a clump of the season. They lose Hawkinson. They lose just about everybody on that offense, and the run game wasn't great either. I won't spoil too much. This team was riddled with injuries. They have a lot of questions going forward, and possibly one of the largest is at the quarterback position, which neither Dylan nor I were a big fan of watching. It was a tale of two halves, I'll put it that way. Kirk sprints out of the gate, was on pace, I think, to have his best season yet. 18 touchdowns, 5 picks through just 8 games. The rest of the season, the Vikings quarterbacks had 12 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and a lot of fans pissed off. Kirk is an unrestricted free agent. I'll leave it there and hand it off to you. C- for me, D+ for you.
Yeah, Kirk O'Chains being a free agent doesn't help the quarterback room at all. And if you watch the backups, they just did not perform. I mean, they went through what, 3 backups was it? And it just was awful to watch. Not good quarterback game. There is a little light at the end of the tunnel if the Vikings spend money, but otherwise, I don't know if there's really any hope for the quarterback position with the Minnesota Vikings.
I thought we had something for about 2 to 3 weeks. They bring in Dobbs. Kyler comes back. Dobbs still wants a job. Dobbs, at that point, had earned a job, in my opinion, at least a temporary. Goes off for a couple weeks and then has a very, very, very poor game against the Bears. Kind of all downhill from there. Starts turning the ball over a ton. So then they go to Nick Mullins. They try him. Great volume passer. Threw for somewhere in the ballpark of 400 and something yards. But the turnovers were the issue. And all of a sudden, the clock started ticking down, and this team needed to go on a playoff run. And if they were going to do so, they had to pretty much run the table with a few weeks to go. So then they go to Jaron Hall, who could not throw it down the field with confidence. Then they went back to Mullins, and there were a few other mix-ups in there as well. Yeah, indecisiveness, and then you go, well, at least you had a really good QB1 when he was healthy, right? Well, not only is he hurt, but yeah, he is an unrestricted free agent. So not a lot to look forward to unless this team wants to break open that wallet and really make some moves. It doesn't get any better. The running back situation, I wasn't sure what to expect. I can't say I was an Alexander Mattison hater, but now I kind of am. 3.9 yards per carry when he gets the limelight over Dalvin Cook. No touchdowns. No rushing touchdowns. Ty Chandler actually proved that he might be justifiable to take over that job, especially with the revolving door of the position that running backs is. Fourth lowest in the league as a team at 91 rushing yards per game. It's tough to get lower than this. I would say the one thing is that they did have a strong RB2. Ty Chandler, I think, could rival most backups. In my opinion, he shouldn't be the backup, and the competition should be wide open next year.
Yeah, I mean, just yikes. Madison was supposed to be the guy. They let Cook go, and this team just hasn't been able to cook up a good run game since. It's just been awful. Even the team has been falling apart without that support that Dalvin Cook brought. It's just, you can really see what happens when your run game goes down, how much it affects the other spots, especially quarterback play. But with the Vikings, they're kind of an anomaly because their position players are just too good.
Yeah, that is fair, because you've got the whole support system of what we'll go over next with this pretty deep and impressive wide receiving core. I think it's just crazy that a running back, when put in a certain situation, can drop like a rock. A year ago, what was Dalvin Cook? I would say top 10, fringe top 7, top 8, depending on what you're looking at in terms of productivity, pass catching involvement. He kind of did it all. Now, he wanted, in the running back market, what would be considered to be an expensive extension, and he ended up being around the 10th highest paid running back on a per year basis when he signed with the Jets, just to be Breece Hall's backup. He took the bulk of his carries at the beginning of the year, and he looked horrible. Well, Madison looked like a serviceable backup in the little sample size that we saw before this year, and it didn't get much better. But where it was good, and I would say something that the Vikings fans can lean on for a long time and Dynasty users should definitely go after, is this wide receiving core. Now, you have Justin Jefferson, unfortunately missed 7 games. But fear not, folks. 10 games was all he needed to have another 1,000-yard season. That is nuts to me. I mean, averaging over 100 yards a game is a tough feat in and of itself. He did that over 10 games, and Mike Evans has 10 years in a row of at least 1,000 receiving yards. Jefferson's got 4 now. I thought the streak was going to die. He went nuts down the stretch, even when this team was eliminated. First-round talent out of USC, Jordan Addison almost had a 1,000-yard season. Probably would have if Jefferson was hurt a little bit more. Brandon Powell looked really nice towards the end. KJ Osborne, the fact that he could be your 4th option, pretty impressive too. They've got depth, they've got star power, and they did it all without a quarterback. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I have it at an A as well. I mean, JJ has played extremely well when on the field. Again, he had injuries this year, but he still put up JJ numbers. Addison had a career year. I expect him to get an increase in production. Again, the quarterback is a dodgy situation depending on what they do there. But then Osborne, I think Osborne's going to make a big leap next season, and I think he'll be a strong wide receiver 3.
Yeah. Osborne was looking like a decent wide receiver 2 last year, and then they go out and draft Addison, went for a little more youth. He's been on that roster for a bit now. The next part that we will go to kind of just shows the situation in Minnesota in general. They really do just need a quarterback and a running back. I mean, the pass catchers are doing their job. And the fact that the quarterback play was this poor and we can still give A's across the board to the wide receiving core and the tight end core, I think is pretty impressive to me. Hawkinson's the obvious, subject here when you talk about the tight ends on this Vikings team. He gets more usage. Torn ACL at the conclusion of the season. That is something I want to monitor for sure. Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt. The fact that I can name 3 tight ends on a team, that in and of itself should say that these guys are involved enough. You really shouldn't know the third tight end on a whole lot of teams unless you're a fan of them. I am not a Vikings fan. I'm pretty much the opposite. Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt in their mini stint where they kind of filled in here and there, they combined for over 380 yards, 3 touchdowns between them. I think that the depth is sneaky good, but we need Hawkinson to come back healthy. Otherwise, this grade will drop a lot.
Yeah, Hawk is my guy. He's a bona fide stud, and you can't teach that. But he's a legend. Before injury, I mean, he was on pace to lead tight ends in yards. Hawk gets about 9 targets a game. What else can you say about a number 1 target at the tight end position? I mean, 9 targets a game is wild. Again, the thing that will kind of devalue this and why I didn't go A+ is just because he doesn't get a lot of red zone targets. He had 3 touchdowns in 15 games. It's just not enough. He needs more production in that red zone.
There's a couple factors there, right? Is it the lackluster quarterback play, or is it the fact that you've got one of the best wide receiving cores in the league and you just have too many mouths to feed? That goes neither here nor there. We'll go to the defensive side of the ball. Mid? We can call them mid. This is pretty much the definition of mid here. Middle of the road. We've got a team that did have a league-high 22 forced fumbles, and I think they would have a much better grade if they recovered more of them. Just didn't roll their way. They only recovered 11. Brian Flores bet on his front 7. We saw this team blitz a decent amount relative to years past, especially in crucial moments. More aggressive. It paid off at times. Other times it did not. Kind of just mid. That's about all I have to say on them.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. Just 15th in fantasy says it all.
Mid.
It's pretty much a middle of the road defense. That's kind of why I gave them the upgrade at C+, because they're 1 away from that middle spot. They're just a fork in the road.
Yeah. I mean, so the Vikings go 7-10. There are a lot of worries around the quarterback position, but if you look at the grades here and you want to make dynasty arguments, I would say I'm feeling a heck of a lot better about Justin Jefferson's value. Doesn't really change in my mind. You can plug anybody in there, they'll probably rely on him. I'm feeling a heck of a lot better about TJ Hawkinson, about Jordan Addison, about KJ Osborne, even about Brandon Powell as well. Probably Powell before Osborne. In the future, if they can solve what's going on under center. Is that re-signing Kirk and taking the chance with his injury? Is that trading up in a pretty stacked quarterback draft class when you look at the first round caliber talent? Is it going out and getting a veteran free agent like one of many that I can think of right now is Gardner Minshew if they cannot bring Kirk back? I don't know, but what I do know is this is one of those situations where you can honestly say, and maybe I'd put the Jets in this pool too, the quarterback situation cannot get worse, meaning it can only get better for the pass catchers. There is a lot to like in the Vikings. They just need to figure out what on earth they're going to do about that QB position. All right, we've put it off long enough, and I'm going to put it off a little bit more. We've got a couple comments. Andy saying, no question about Jahmyr Gibbs. He killed it in fantasy, and I've got it on Jordan Love. Proud of myself. I could very well be a in denial Bears fan and say I hate Jordan Love, but he's a nice guy. Met him once, and he's killing it with the tools he has. So thank you for the recognition there, Andy. I think we both are very high on someone who, in his first year, I don't know if he could have had a better year, to be honest. Now, speaking of the quarterback position and speaking of hot topics going into draft season, there is not another team in the NFL that should come to mind when you think of NFL draft and quarterback controversy other than the Chicago Bears. We're going to grade the Chicago Bears coming off of a 7-10 season. They improved by 4 wins after going 3-14 in 2022. For the second straight year, they have the number 1 overall draft pick. There are a lot of assets here, so when you talk about Dynasty and looking into the future, this is one where you really have to project forward because this team controls their own destiny, and a lot rests on the shoulders of Ryan Poles, including what on earth we're going to do about the quarterback position. I've got B-. Dylan's got C-. Sorry. This was going to happen somewhere, and it was going to happen either on the Bears or Packers. Inconsistency galore with Justin Fields. I kind of see where you're coming from here. Rushing upside is beneficial for fantasy. We saw Fields go off last year. This year, not so much of it. Got hurt again, which I didn't love for, I believe he was out for 4 games. The reason this grade isn't lower for me, we talked about a team in the Vikings where, yes, they can go out and pick, but, they're limited to a certain amount of options, and unless they trade up, there's that. We also talked about a team in the Browns. Horrible quarterback situation. They are tied at the hip to a man they owe $92 million of base salary for the next 2 years in Deshaun Watson. The Bears don't have that. So the reason I have a B- here is because they have the number 1 overall pick and they have a couple options. Stick with Fields, trade back, build around him, maybe improve those numbers. DJ Moore and Marvin Harrison Jr. wouldn't be a bad option. Or invest in a quarterback, trade Fields, and still go get a weapon. I think the fact that they control their own destiny just keeps them barely above water. If we're purely evaluating by Fields, I'd probably be more towards your grade.
Yeah, my grade's at that C-. Fields didn't have a bad year by all means, but he didn't have a good one either, especially when he needed to have an above average year. So that's why I'm at a C-. The C for me is average, and he was just below average. He needed to have an above average year to keep that job, and now with question marks in Chicago, it's up in the air, because I think if you keep Fields, I think the grade goes up. If you don't keep Fields, I project the grade goes down because you're restarting the entire process once again.
That's fair. Because even if they do end up going up down the road, let's say Caleb is him, or if they go after Drake May or something else that would shock me, right? In essence, you are resetting with a rookie. At least with Fields, if you do keep him, you have the assets at pick number 1 and pick number 9. At the time of this recording, they could go roulette and trade a ton like they did before. We're almost coming up on the 1-year anniversary of DJ Moore. Who knows, right? But then you build around him, and things can only get better as long as he stays on the field. Yeah, so we're pretty separated on this one, but for different reasons. I'm assuming you're kind of leaning with that grade then that they go grab a quarterback. But even if they don't, this is a tryout year for Fields, and he hasn't performed the best under pressure so far. But, promising finish. Yeah, this might be one of the most question-filled positions ever.
What's with the hate towards Drake May? What's with that?
I don't think he's number 1 overall. And I also think he went to the same college as a certain Mitch Trubisky.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Didn't the Bears do something lucrative with a North Carolina quarterback? Is the history going to repeat itself?
I don't want to find out. I really don't want to find out. My birthday is right around the draft, so I'm sure I'll get exactly what I want this year. We'll go to the running backs. Running back room by committee. We've seen this situation a lot around the NFL. 4.5 yards a carry, 141 rushing yards per game. If you group these guys together into a conglomerate, we're talking about Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert, and Deontay Foreman, who's on a 1-year deal, so we'll see what they do with that situation. You get a great back. The problem is you can't do that. You can't make a running back Frankenstein. Nobody on this team had over 650 yards on the ground. They each had different strengths. Herbert and Roschon were more through the air. Deontay Foreman was run downhill and hit you in the mouth. They all had good moments, but you can't go to the Bears and go, yup, I want that guy for the future due to contract implications and due to just a bunch of balanced talent. They did great as a group, Dylan, but there's not really one definitive guy back there.
Yeah, no, I thought it was going to be Herbert to start the year, and it turned out it wasn't going to be Herbert. It was a team effort in the run game here, like you mentioned. My takeaway would be that Fields being a mobile quarterback takes away value in the running backs, as well as Caleb Williams. Again, looking forward and not backward, that Caleb Williams does like to run the ball or scramble when needed, and he can take away value from that running back position as well. So it's just looking at the potential market of quarterbacks and what they offer towards that running back position as well.
See, I like that because when we looked at the Ravens, you kind of had the same argument and you're staying consistent with that. If you look at that team's rushing stats on paper, you go, oh my goodness, we've got a lot of promise here. But a chunk of that is Lamar, and that means a chunk of that is not going to Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, J.K. Dobbins, Keaton Mitchell, which again, we have a committee. So even outside of your Lamars and your Fields taking, in these two situations, a decent chunk of the rushing production, you don't have a definitive running back one anyway. So now we're even getting smaller pieces of the pie. That's pretty good evaluation. I think you kind of convinced me to swing there, to be honest, because Fields does take a good chunk out of that. We'll go to the wide receiver spot. Yeah, we alluded to this before, and we've talked about this with certain teams. DJ Moore is carrying. This is a textbook example of a one-and-done wide receiving core. It's DJ Moore and then everybody else. The wide receiver 2 this year was Darnell Mooney, 414 yards. He was a 1,000-yard receiver a couple years ago, so kind of sad to see that decline. Tyler Scott was next, around 200 receiving yards. That is the wide receiver 3. We do have Cole Kmet. We kind of have a Detroit Lions situation where the tight end is the secondary option, but there is still a huge drop-off. If DJ Moore is not on this offense, this is how much weight I hold to his production in a career year. They are an F. They are an F to me without DJ Moore.
Yeah, DJ Moore had an incredible year, but this is the first probably complete year I've seen from DJ Moore. And that's kind of why I'm still like a little hesitant to bump the grade up a little bit. The Mooney situation has just disappointed me every year I've drafted him. He has just been inconsistent to say the least. It's been 2 seasons now, not showing much promise. I don't know what you can do with that wide receiver room as well. Again, 200 yards out of your wide receiver 3 is just absurd.
Yeah.
The receiver room is so top heavy that DJ Moore carries it to a B-, but I don't see the ceiling anywhere near B to B+ in that regards.
I would have to look up the specifics on Fields' game against the Commanders where the Bears got their first win in almost a calendar year. But that's a whole nother thing. We've come a long way, Chicago. We've won 6 since then. That's actually pretty impressive. But I will say I remember that I believe DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, either they were the only 2 to catch a pass or DJ Moore was the only technical wide receiver to catch a pass. One of those 2 things was true. So we also have a quarterback who is heavily relying on one option, which is fine. But for the sake of Dynasty, I will teeter down to a B- with you if they go after Caleb Williams for 2 reasons. One, you've got to hope that Caleb completely relies on Moore and throws half of his passing yards to him if you want the same production. Caleb would probably throw more than 2,500 considering he's not much of a runner compared to Fields. But there is also the option, especially in today's NFL market. DJ Moore's been pretty vocal that he likes Justin Fields. They go out and get Caleb after DJ made his wishes very apparent. See ya. I'd like a trade. That's also an option. And if that happens, this wide receiving core tanks fast. So I hope that doesn't happen. I hope if they go for Caleb, this team doesn't fall apart for my own personal biases. But that's going to fall like a rock if he does. So. Oh, that'd be a nightmare. All right. Well, one thing to look forward to and be happy about with the Bears, if you're in Dynasty and looking for a pretty consistent, not middle of the road, but I would say top tier-ish, top 10 fringe tight end, Cole Kmet, true second receiving option on this team. This year he had career highs in receptions with 73, receiving yards with 719, and this is now the 3rd year in a row that he's had at least 500 receiving yards. He's not going to touch 1,000. He's not going to get close to touching 1,000, but he's been that reliable secondary option the last couple of years. He's been a prominent part of this offense, and even though they run the ball a lot, he's not there for blocking. They mostly use Tunyon in that regard, who I believe had just over 100 receiving yards. So not much utilization behind Kmet. That's why I had them topping out at a B+, but Komet's about as reliable as they come.
Yeah, I'm actually going to change my grade from a B plus to an A minus.
Oh, all right, Dylan.
Because Komet fits so well with the team, especially enticing to view him as the number 2 option in the passing game, as well as that he improves every year and he's only 24. So he's got a ton of years to come in Dynasty. He's very consistent and he just provides a lot of value in the near future.
I will have this clip forever of you talking positively about the Bears tight end, and that really makes me happy. On to the defense. All right, so we've got B plus for me, B for Dylan. 16 picks in the last 7 weeks after a rough start for this team that was allowing a lot through the air. And then the front 7 starts to get home when you get a certain Montez Sweat. Only player in history to lead 2 different teams in sacks. I'm not sure to be impressed or kind of pitiful of both the Bears and Commanders because they only had a guy for half a season and he was able to beat a slew of people who played all 17 or pretty close to it. I will say he was a game changer, and Tyreek Stevenson, I'm going to bring up this DJ Moore trade as much as I can and as often as I can because it's one of the only things that Bears fans have to hold on to. But I will note that Tyreek Stevenson had a few picks in his first year, and he was one of many studs in the form of draft picks that the Bears got for what has been Bryce Young. So exciting pieces in the secondary. The front 7 driven hard by Montez Sweat. Wouldn't be shocked if they go after another pass rusher. This team is relatively young. Eberflus looks like he is staying. It was not a group firing between him and Getsy. So you've got a defensive-oriented coach and a bunch of strong young guys who really made some noise the last few games. I love this move for Dynasty.
Yeah, I like the secondary a lot. There's a lot of young pieces in there that is really enticing for this defense. But what holds me back is the front 7. You only have one major player in that front 7, and you kind of need a little bit more to bounce off of Sweat to really make that defense look like a well-oiled machine. You look at most of the defenses now, and they have 2 to 3 pass rushers. I mean, you look at the Packers, not to put a comparison of Bear-Packer rivalry, but it's just the team I know most about. They have Smith, Van Ness, and Gary. That's 3 players in that pass rush game, as well as you have Kenny Clark that clogs up the middle, but he can still break through and get a sack here and there. So it's just a matter of time of upgrading that front 7.
It's interesting because they got some names in the offseason. They went out and got Edwards. They went out and got Tremaine Edmonds as well. I don't have the numbers on this because I just thought of it. I didn't see this team blitz nearly as much as I thought they would have. With the personnel, you've got a couple guys in that I just named that are pretty good at dropping back in coverage, and they've got a couple of picks to their names as well. But I was really shocked we didn't bring the house a lot more, especially with certain members of this secondary being younger. Jalen Johnson, oh yeah, pay him. If he doesn't come back, this is really going to throw a wrench in things. But he's another reason I had a B+, and I'm sure that's at the forefront of the reasons you had a decent grade for this team as well on defense. Yeah, front 7's an issue. Jack Sanborn, I love him in the open field, but he is undersized, so I start to wonder, are they going to bring in some support on his end? Swap reps out. I think he's done a fine job, but I would like to see more blitzes. It is still Eberflus, so I don't know if we're going to see a complete game plan change, but looking at the Bears as a whole, this is kind of funny. They went 8 of 10 on Bs. I had 5 Bs and you had 3 Bs for him. Bs for the Bears. A lot to be excited about in terms of the young talent on defense. A lot to be nervous about if you're looking to invest in this team's quarterback situation because we don't know who the heck's going to be back there. What we do know is the Bears have about as much control in the form of draft capital and cap space as anybody in the league. So changes are coming, and it's probably best right now in Dynasty to respond as opposed to predicting what's going to happen in the future. This is the part of the episode where we kind of just riff and answer any of your questions. Again, I'm Corey. That's Dylan above me here. This is Armchair Fantasy Football. We just covered the NFC North and their grades at their relative positions. So we went quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense in the form of Dynasty grades. So what are we going to be seeing in 2024 In the case of teams like the Bears, we don't really know. But there were certain scenarios where we were able to project, go off of what we saw in 2023 heading into the playoffs. Now is your chance, folks, if you want to ask us any questions, fantasy-wise, dynasty or not. Dylan, while we're waiting for those to kind of trickle in and kind of wrapping this show up, I do want to ask, out of the categories that we covered, is there a position on a certain team that you think will grow more than the rest?
Oh boy. Oh. So I'm just gonna say it's nothing from Detroit,
Okay.
but it is gonna be from my team. I think the wide receiver position for the Packers can improve
Yeah, I like
a
that.
lot.
I like that a lot.
Just because they're young. I mean, they had first and second year guys out there, and like they're gonna improve. Like, there's no doubt that they're gonna improve.
I like that a lot. You have Dobbs and you have Reed, I think, really competing for that wide receiver 1 spot. But if you're in a deeper dynasty league or you have, a super flex or an expanded bench, Dontavion Wicks should be ringing a bell at this point. You should have heard his name enough to where you go, maybe I invest in this guy. If you're a risk taker and you want to boom or bust and you're willing to accept injuries, Christian Watson should come to mind because he could get you 21 week, but you also have to understand he might make a trip or two to the IR. I am going to go to the Vikings and kind of go off of the premise that this could not get worse. And I said this before, figure out the quarterback position, not just because it couldn't get worse. That won't be the only part of my argument. Look at the pieces around them. I do think they'll invest in a running back of some sorts, whether that be giving more reps to Ty Chandler and really trying to improve the situation in-house, drafting somebody, or going after a free agent. I don't have the running back free agents on hand right now. But if you look at the wide receiver and tight end positions, I don't know if there's a team that's better equipped without their quarterback right now based on the surrounding cast. I really do think this is a plug and play, even a mid to late first rounder, or, heck, right? Go out and get Gardner Minshew and give him a chance because Anthony Richardson will be back and Minshew will be out of a job, but you can't really convince me there's 32 better than him right now because he did have a good season, took him close. I think this is a phenomenal plug-and-play scenario where you have a lot of support in place for a quarterback.
Yeah, I was just looking up what the difference between restricted and unrestricted, and Kirk Cousins is free to go to any team he pleases.
Mm-hmm.
There's no match option, so restricted would be if, let's say, the Steelers pay Kirk Cousins $30 million a year. The Vikings have the option to match it, and then Kirk can pick between the two teams. That's not in play. Kirk is free to sign wherever he wants, and I'm not sure if the Vikings have that cap space to do so, because Kirk Cousins is going to want a $30 million plus a year contract.
I'd argue he deserves it. You do have this supporting cast, and people will go, oh my gosh, who wouldn't throw 30 touchdowns with this cast? Well, we just found 3 new names this year on the Vikings who gave it a shot and couldn't do it. So clearly his job is not as easy as we thought it was. I got a lot more respect for Kirk Cousins because we tried to watch Nick Mullins. We tried to watch Josh Dobbs. We tried to watch Jaren Hall. And, these guys have varying levels of experience, especially compared to somebody like Kirk, who's been in the league for well over a decade now. But they fell on their face. So, yeah, 2 situations here, right? Kirk comes back and, yeah, it's going to be a lot better than a C- or D+ year at the position. Or you go get somebody who's established. You don't stick with this quarterback room. I think if there's anything the Vikings learned this year, it's that they have the supporting cast to succeed. You need to change what's going on under center, whether that's go invest in Kirk one more time or go find somebody else. Yeah, so there's a ceiling there. There's definitely a ceiling there. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for watching. Again, feel free to browse around the channel. We've got daily shorts coming back up. We'll have some videos popping up regarding Dynasty as well. Any questions you have, feel free to pop in the live chat right now, or once this is archived in the comment section. Discord link in the description is good for a week, and then it expires. Just learn that. So if you want to join and get some free advice, have some conversation, get set for the 2024-25 season, that is an option. We're providing it for you, and I highly suggest you take advantage of it. I'm Corey. That's Dylan. Dylan, thanks for coming on again. We've got 6 more of these. We'll kind of see where it takes us, but that was a fun one.
Yeah, this was a fun one. It was, I guess, a little biased that it was fun because it's our home division,
I didn't have fun.
but I'd like to say that we've got a few divisions coming up that are going to be real fun to do.
Yeah. We asked the chat before where we will go. I think we'll make the executive decision on this one. Dylan and I were talking before we turned the mics on today. We're probably going to go to the West. So we've been alternating. We went AFC North, now NFC North. We'll probably go AFC West, NFC West. Lots going on. Jim Harbaugh is now the coach for the Chargers. Mahomes, at the time of this recording, is possibly going on another run. He's hit his 6th AFC Championship game in 6 tries, which is nuts. And then if we look at the NFC West, there's a lot of revolving there, but the one thing that hasn't changed the last few years now, the 49ers are pretty good contenders. So look out for that. We will be aiming for that middle of next week. But again, I'm Corey. That's Dylan. This is Armchair Fantasy Football. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.